thought that maybe the season was back on, and then Lady Luck said, April Fools, this is not that kind of gooner, an Arsenal podcast, and we're coming to you after a 2-1 home win against Fulham, in which, yes, Bukayo Saka made his return. The stadium roared like he had scored a goal. It was really lovely to see, and then he did score a goal, which was even better. So that was cool, but unfortunately, it came at the cost of Gabriel also suffering a season-ending injury. And we're going to have to deal with that over the next couple of weeks, especially against Real Madrid. That's definitely the focus of this. And yeah, just one in, one out, easy come, easy go. Unfortunately, we can't easily go to the end of the season, which is kind of what I want to do right now. But we'll get into that. We'll talk about Gabriel, and we will talk about Gyok later on in the pod as well. But first, let me introduce everybody who's on here. So I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. You can follow me on Blue Sky at shamsdale.bluesky.social. We have Drew. You can follow on Twitter at GeeChieKid. And you can follow on Blue Sky at Supply and Demand Drew.bsky.social. Drew, happy St. Totteringham's Day to you.
Happy St. Totteringham's Day. I've got the pleasure of covering that match for work. So I got to enjoy it fully. And now we're back to coping mode, given the Gabriel news. So,
Well, at least you got that little dollop of goodness ahead of what's going to be kind of a grueling situation. We've also got John, who you can follow on Twitter at 305cast and on Blue Sky at yellowribbons.bsky.social. John, happy St. Totteringham's Day to you.
Happy St. Totteringham's Day. It's always good. Even, the fact that we can still finish above Spurs is still like a little bit of a beacon of happiness in an otherwise, kind of difficult week, at least from an injury perspective. So
it's nice to know that with everything going wrong on our end, it's 100 times
always worse.
Yeah,
it's always worse over there. So
just
that does help us put it in perspective a little bit.
Yeah, just sheer chaos and dysfunction over there, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And we are joined for the first time on the pod by an illustrious guest, the one, the only Dr. Raj Paul Brar, who you can follow on Twitter at 3CB Performance. Dr. Raj, welcome to the pod, and happy St. Totteringham's Day to you.
Thanks for having me. I'm right back at you. Always a nice day.
Well, we're just gonna jump right into it because I know we've only got you for a little bit here, so we'll talk about the Gabriel situation, and I believe John wanted to open up with the first question here. John, take it away.
Yeah, I've thought about this one pretty extensively, and I've kind of whittled it down. So my question to you is, why?
That's pretty. I mean, to me, it's pretty. It's always multivariable. The biggest issue is schedule congestion, especially year-round football. You're not meant to play any sport, whether it's adolescent, whether it's youth, whether it's pro, year-round. And so it's just too much on the body. It's something I've talked about on Twitter, I don't know, 100 times. Players need proper off seasons. It's the most important part, in my opinion, of the season. They say titles are won in the off season, and that's not just because we're recovery. That's when you actually build up your physical and mental base as well. Mikel has touched on this too. There's a great clip with him talking about it, right? Saying where players can't recover, they're pretty much just burning the candle at both ends. And a lot of that comes down to the off season. You have players playing international football. Now they're coming back. They're coming into camp later, right? So not only are they gassed out with limited physical mental recovery, now you come into camp later, which means a quicker ramp up for matches, right? Which leads to more risk, then cumulative fatigue. Think about stuff like Winter World Cups, which completely disrupts everything, training, everything, right? More and more, obviously, whatever, international games, et cetera, et cetera. So you add all that up, and you have what we have right now, which is soft tissue injuries being up across all football leagues, not just, I know obviously this is Arsenal specifically, but if you look at hamstring injuries, I think this season, it's like if you dole them out, it's almost like 5 per team right now. So it's incredibly high. For the last 10 years, I think they've doubled hamstring injury occurrence in general. And so, you have more games, you have higher intensity of matches, Premier League, better and better teams up and down, right? So it's just a really difficult situation, I think, for all teams and players. And then you have, I didn't even mention, you have a lot of these, preseason tours now that are in different countries with more and more money involved. Like last year, we're talking about Tottenham, I think they flew off to like Australia to play like 3 days after the end of their season, right? So it's just like, it's getting a little ridiculous. So that to me is honestly the underlying factor behind everything.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because as Arsenal fans, obviously our focus is the club, right? But if you look at the total number of cumulative hamstring injuries this season, I think Chelsea have suffered 10 hamstring injuries this season. Spurs have had 9.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always clubs that are affected more than we are. But I don't know. I think if you kind of think back to it, maybe 50, 60 years ago, sometimes the top international players were only getting 30, 40 caps across their entire career, depending. But then you can look at now you have like Jude Bellingham sitting on however many caps. He's 21 or 22 years old. So it just kind of is proof positive that just football by extension, players are just playing more from a younger age, which means, obviously, again, as Doc said, more susceptible to injuries. And for me, things like the Club World Cup has no relevance on basically anything. Mid-season World Cups. For me, my biggest gripe with football today is when money becomes involved. Obviously, matches generate it. Not just tickets or merchandise. It's sponsorship, is everything. And when money gets involved like this, players become second fiddle to powers that be lining their pockets, right? And one comparison to North American sports is there's greater unions involved in terms of protecting players. Players have more power as well. And I think for me, the only way moving forward to avoid this becoming an epidemic level kind of issue is to make hard decisions at that level, and if players have to kind of even revolt or boycott, it's necessary because we're in a position now where you're looking at. It wouldn't shock me if a team again had like double the hamstring injuries 2 years from now that maybe Spurs had this season. So it's difficult, it's frustrating, but I'm at the current landscape. It's hard to know what the solution is at the moment.
And I just kind of throwing into that, and we've talked about this before, and it's like almost like beating a dead horse at this point. But it seems like, or from a refereeing standpoint as well, we're seeing a lot of dangerous challenges going around, especially this season. Dangerous play that's not being properly officiated as well. So you have all of this stuff that Roger is indicating with preseasons and more congested fixtures. We have maybe, like you were saying, Drew, a desire or kind of a drive to increase revenue. And not only that, you have this refereeing decisions that seemingly are not taking player safety into account, which I think is a perfect storm. I think we lost Raj. There he is.
Yeah. Doc, can you hear us? Okay, I think we lost him for a second, but there he is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry.
We were just saying the refereeing is terrible too.
Yeah, no, officiating, obviously, I mean, James Sarkowski comes to mind right now. But
No.
yeah, it's one of them. I think one thing also is when you think about when you have more fatigue on players, it tends to negatively impact decision making, which leads to worse challenges, which leads to worse ability to get out of challenges. And so that's a big part too. When you have tired players, we know it impacts your cognitive ability as well. So, that's also part and parcel with some of these contact injuries. Although, from an Arsenal perspective, we've been able to avoid a lot of contact injuries, but that still certainly, I think, comes into play. Generally, I'd agree with that for sure.
Doc, do you what sort of role do you think rotation or lack thereof has played in kind of the injury crisis that we've had going on this season? I've seen a lot of people trying to put this on Arteta and questioning training methods and kind of implying that we're overplaying guys in situations that they don't need to play. I keep on hearing about Gabriel playing the second leg against PSV when we were already 7-1 up on aggregate. So how much do you think that plays into the number of knee and hamstring injuries that we've had this season?
I mean, I think you're going to play into it some for sure, from that regard. But I think the proportional amount of attention that it gets compared to some of the bigger items, it's disproportionate. For example, I think Gabriel played once in 9 days before this game, and now he picked up a hamstring injury, right? So, a lot of this stuff it's cumulative over the years, and it comes from not being able to build up your capacity to handle a workload. When does that happen? The off season, right?
Yeah.
And so rotation, of course, is going to be important, especially if players who are redlining on your metrics for sure. But again, it's not quite that simple. If it was all just about rotation, why do we see a bump in injuries at the start of a season? And that's because you have players who are now preseason going to regular matches with higher. Anytime you increase intensity, you're at risk for an injury, right? And so there's that aspect as well. Question is, what's that player's fitness like? Does rotating them actually reduce their fitness? Because there are some players, and this is why there's a new paradigm why you see a lot of Arsenal making like subs for 30 minutes, is that you'll have guys come in and play 30 minutes and that replaces what we call like their filler fitness topper after the match, right? And so a lot of times you're using matches now to be at that fitness topper as well. So it really just depends on that specific player. It's not as simple as, just rest the guy, right? And this idea, let's let these guys rest for 2 weeks. Again, Gabriel's case in point. Like, it's not just simply about rest. It's not just about overplaying guys. It's also about underplaying guys. You got to find that medium. And so, there's so much that goes into fitness. And unfortunately, the way that it's spoken about, especially on Twitter, is so basic. I would love to hear these people talk about other fitness topics and, really get their insight on things.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Drew, did you want to jump in here?
No, I think it's interesting because with the advancements in sports science that we have, we know that clubs meticulously track players' workloads, but also physiologically speaking, every player is different from another. I think Doc brought that point out brilliantly. It's what works for Gabriel might not work for Havertz or whatever it might be. And it's difficult because when you look at the data as well, you'll see that specifically for this season that we're nowhere near the most intense side in the Premier League yet. We've still suffered hamstring injuries, but right about the same average that the Premier League has suffered. So it always grates me that fans want to try to find fault with Arteta or the club for mismanagement. But if anything, I would say that players are borderline overmanaged at this point, and they kind of have to be because of the intensity that football has come on. And there was that, I don't have it up right now, but there's that graph that came out about the steady incline of the intensity of Premier League matches over the last 7 or 8 years. But it's been a steady growth year on year, and that kind of shows you what the players are in for. And then when you mix in unnecessary travel with international call-ups and summertime that mean nothing, things like this are bound to happen, right? So I'm with Doc on this, where I get frustrated where Twitter experts like to pretend that they're experts, but they're really not, and they like to argue with actual doctors, and that for me will always frustrate me. But yeah, I think there's always going to be a solution, right, for anything, but this one might be a little bit tricky because there's so many things that are out of our control, right?
Yeah, I mean, for example, last year we had one of the best injury records in the league, right? And nothing has changed in terms of really of our physio or our science staff or our fitness staff. So did our training suddenly change 1 year to the next, right? No, right? So it's like the variables haven't changed, but the injuries are there. Does that mean you have to look at not the outcome, you have to look at the process? The process is the same. There's got to be something else outside of that process, which is most likely causing this, correct? And so when you look at the cumulative fatigue over the years, this is a team that's been pushing hard, whether it was for Champions League, whether it's last year, obviously, to win for the entire season, right? Especially the back half of the season. And then so you have all these cumulative effects. It's always easy to blame this nebulous training methods or whatever it is, but those haven't changed. So how come it didn't happen last year? Why is it happening this year, right? So again, it's people looking for black and white answers to a gray area problem.
Yeah. And, like in terms of things that have changed, right? It's like you said, a lot of it's the off season where you look at last summer, and Rodri, he played, basically every match, almost every possible minute of the Euros. He won the Euros, and this is coming off, 2-3 years of playing, high 3,000s, low 4,000s in terms of minutes. 50, 60 games a season, competing all like to the very end of like several different competitions every year. So, he goes down with the ACL in September, and then Saka, right? Similar situation, playing a high number of minutes, plays based like almost every minute at the Euros as well. Declan Rice does play exactly every minute possible of the Euros, and he's suffering some injury problems as well. So, in the meantime, Mohamed Salah didn't play, in an international tournament during the summer. He kind of, compared to everyone else, got to put his feet up a little bit. So yeah, I think people have a problem with these situations where there's not really any one person to blame. It's just it's unfortunate. And sure, like I'm sure Arteta and his training staff and other people involved in these types of decision making, like, are going to review this in the summer and see if there's anything that they could have done differently. But I think people are just having a hard time accepting that it's shit luck, to be quite honest. So, but yeah, I guess my another question I've kind of been wondering about with guys like Havertz and Saka and Gabriel is, are you worried about any potential long-term impacts these injuries are going to have on them moving forward?
I mean, the biggest concern is with a soft tissue injury, like a hamstring injury, is re-injury. That's the biggest predictor of future injury is previous injury. Other than that, all the data shows you can get back to your normal level. So, what you really want to look out for is recurrence, and that's kind of like what's played Tottenham this year, right? Like with Van de Ven, with Romero, I think he had multiple. Richarlison had multiple. So, in general, you want to look out with hamstring injuries is recurrence injuries, and so that's really the main issue. I think, for example, like with Arsenal, I believe I've heard that Saka, typically you'll have surgery on a grade 3 full rupture. Like, from my understanding, more and more so, some teams like Arsenal, and I don't know this for sure, so I'm not revealing anything private because I couldn't do that from a personal or privacy perspective, is that some teams are actually moving, even with high level partial tears, they're moving towards surgery to help get rid of some of that scar tissue, which can be part of the problem when it comes to recurrence. And so, they're trying to prevent that through whether it's surgery and then also through some of the rehabilitation protocols as well.
That's interesting, because I have seen kind of this mischaracterization online of every hamstring injury or every hamstring tear that requires surgery being a grade 3.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
for example, I mean, the best classification system now is actually out of 4 grades. So that just tells you how outdated a lot of the stuff you hear online is. It's actually 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes 3, 1, 3, 2. So there's a lot more detail than people think.
yeah. Well, I guess I mean, are you like concerned about like Gabriel, or I guess my question is, what kind of timeline are we looking at for Gabriel, specifically returning from this hamstring injury, right? Like, is it going to be something like Havertz, where it might be a push for him to be available at the start of next season, or is this something that he should be able to kind of ramp up to full fitness over the course of the summer?
Yeah, well, I hadn't actually heard that about Kai, that he might have an issue with the offseason. Typically, look, not, although I might not just have heard it. So, typically you're looking around 10 to 12 weeks usually here, even with if it's a full rupture. So, 3 months or so typically. I think it might actually be, I don't want to say a silver lining here. At least it gives a proper summer off to build up after the injury, right? Of course, you don't just want to be rehabbing over the summer, but it does give some time off. And so I think both him and Kai should be ready to go for next season. Of course, you want to temper those expectations, considering you're coming off a major injury. And so, but yeah, I would expect. And if you look, actually, it's interesting. If you actually look at how Arsenal have dealt with hamstring injuries with players coming back, they actually have a really, really good record with it, especially when it comes to preventing recurrence. Like Partey had a hamstring injury, never dealt with it again. Martinelli has looked excellent, knock on wood, after his hamstring injury. So they actually have, and you can go through, they have a really good record of players coming back from hamstring injury. And so hopefully that continues.
Doctor, so my question to you is, with all of that being understood in terms of maybe the mechanism for the injury, the kind of context in which these injuries are happening, what is, if you can come up with one, what is a solution to that? So either is it squad building? Is it just understanding that this is kind of the new normal and we just have to kind of accept that that's happening? And if that's the case, is there something that we need to go back to the drawing board about how we recruit, about how we're looking at players with specific types of injuries, which I'm sure we're doing already, but now maybe even to a higher extent, given the kind of proliferation of these kind of injuries and the increase in that everything that we said about, more fixtures, more tournaments, preseason issues and things like that. So what is the solution to any of this, if there is one?
Yeah, I mean, if the new reality, which is going to be just, money in the end will govern all these things. Unfortunately, is that, you're going to have these year-round games. You got to have more squad depth. Absolutely. Right. That's critical. In that regard, you have to have players you can obviously rely on outside the 12, 13 that we see with some of these top teams. I mean that is absolutely a key one. Hopefully, you would think maybe being a little more conservative, sending players on international duty or whatever it is. Potentially that's also another big one. And something I've actually mentioned a few times is there might be a premium on players like Salah who don't compete in some of these bigger tournaments. So
that's very interesting, because usually you would think like international player had the premium, but now, ones that are competing on the biggest stages, but now it sounds like what you're saying is maybe there's a world where that's actually a negative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if underlying, you're saying the issue is not having off seasons and congested schedules, and you can find a player at a top level who doesn't play those matches, it gives you competitive advantage, right? So
yeah, definitely.
Also, just to jump in here, I mean, I think another solution that we're going to see is specifically related to national duty is I think if I remember correctly, there was a report recently that Bayern Munich are looking into taking legal action against the Canadian national team for playing Alphonso Davies during
right?
Yeah, because Davies tore his ACL on international duty. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more of those actions in the future, especially because, the schedule isn't easing up for club teams, and these are the teams that pay, basically the entirety of the money that footballers make from actually playing football. Mm-hmm. So, if these guys are going out on international duty and they're picking up injuries and they're coming back and it's affecting, how the clubs do and kind of at the end of the day, their bottom line. I could see kind of a basis for legal action there if, clubs feel that it's rising to like an actual level of wrongful harm.
Yeah, I think Davies' case was unique in that like he was kind of red line. He was in that red line area from my understanding. Like kind of they didn't say that, but it seems like that's what it was from a fatigue level, and they still played him. So you could I certainly understand Bayern on that. However, I think usually there's a lot more gray area, right? Like how does a club define someone being, the risk levels? That's always going to be up to interpretation typically. So that will be the tough part.
Yeah. No, and I think definitely clubs will have to kind of be able to. I think the burden will be on clubs to prove that, and to prove that maybe national teams should have known not to play teams. And like you say, that's kind of difficult to lay out in black and white.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we have seen with certain players is that the club will send the physio with them, right? Although you only have so many physios, right? So that's also one thing that we have seen more and more of, send them with the player on international duty.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting with the Bayern thing. I think Doc is correct about he was already redlining it, and just because a club releases a player for international duty if the player wants to accept the call, it does not mean that the international team has to use the player. And I think Bayern's argument was, once Canada didn't make the finals, why were they playing him in a useless third place game, which has no significant footballing relevance? That was the basis of their argument. Where it makes sense if you play him against, in the match before that, but the third place match, which doesn't do anything at all, why are Canada using a player? And then also after that, Canada didn't properly assess him before sending him back to Bayern. So he got no post-match assessment on a known issue, and then traveled on an injured leg, and then returned with probably more damage given the travel. So I think that's kind of what that lawsuit or
it's kind of a slippery slope, though, because, well, not a slippery slope, but it's kind of a dangerous game you're playing, because if you're, these players like love playing for their national team.
Yep.
So if you start creating a problem for them, it could, I see why you'd want to do it, to protect them and protect your team and a valuable asset you have and a valuable player. But you run the risk maybe in that kind of a scenario of really of pissing the player off, essentially.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong about that. And when we've seen it before, we've had players come out and say, they'll sometimes play through injury because they want to play, whether it's for a club or represent their country for whatever it might be. Players have a lot of power these days as well. Mm-hmm. So, I agree with you, Jay. I think this is why there's no easy solution, because there's so many mitigating factors and there's so much context behind it, case by case basis. So nothing is ever simple, is it?
Yeah. Also, a lot of competing interests as well.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a really difficult situation. I think part of it is why I think, let's say from Arsenal perspective, is why you need, I think more and more so you need a manager like Mikel, who's a very player who develops those relationships with players, and so you can have those honest conversations with players, right? And I think that's going to be more and more critical, because to make them understand, hey, I understand you want to play for your national team, but we also have to consider risk reward, right? So I think that's the big thing with the Davies injury. The risk reward there makes no sense, right? So it's just being more and more. Yeah, it's just being more and more confounding variables thrown into everything, and so which makes it harder and harder.
Yeah. Well, Doc, I know you probably have to take off in a minute, so I've got one last question for you. This is for Dr. Brar, the fan. How are you feeling about the season up until now? I mean, are you kind of happy with how the team has performed given a lot of the circumstances around the season, or are there kind of parts about how we've done this season that you find really disappointing?
Agreed.
I think we've lost the.
Yeah. It's that LA traffic, I feel.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see if he's able to jump back in at some point. But I think just for me, the Gabriel injury was just such a kick in the balls, if I'm being honest, just because of how, Saka came back. And I think when we all kind of collectively learned that was going to happen, that was on the table, really felt like the season was back on. It felt like anything was possible in terms of maybe we could beat Real Madrid. Maybe Liverpool could fall apart over the last 10 games of the season. We could do something, right? Or at least we could really hold on to second place and, end the season on a high. And so, for Saka to come back and then for Gabriel to get injured, 15 minutes into the game, I think was just so disappointing. Doc, you back?
Yeah, my iPhone temperature was too high. I just disabled my phone.
Okay,
this conversation was getting heated. That's why.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just my final question for you is, how are you feeling about the season in terms of how, in terms of kind of the circumstances that we've seen, and are you impressed with how the team has done this season given all those things, or are there things that you think maybe Arsenal could have done a little bit better and really should have overcome a little bit better?
I mean, honestly, when you look at the amount of injuries and you look at who they've been to, and you look at how in past seasons, even 1 or 2 injuries would completely throw the team off. I've actually been quite impressed with the adaptability and resiliency, of the team. Yeah, I know. Obviously, we're pushing. We all wanted a title, but second place, considering circumstances, right? You look at how we've played in the Champions League, right? Obviously, the cups you wish it a little bit farther, but I think all things considered, um, I've been pretty impressed with the team, and I think the process is still there. You just got to keep plugging along. And then if you can add the additions we need up front that we all know we need, I certainly think there's a great platform from this season to learn from, and kind of keep building, have the players what they've gone through and the resilience they've built. And then also, obviously, a lot of some of these official decisions have been ridiculous, which we all know. It's a whole different conversation. But when you add in all those things, I really think for me, it's still been a season that I'm proud of personally. And I still think in the Champions League, I think with the adaptability and resilience we've shown, I still think we certainly have a chance to really make some noise there.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think kind of considering the injuries and the officiating, and I think we kind of did have a brutal schedule to start, and a few other things. Yeah, like you said, I think the team has shown really great resilience and has really fought really hard and really in an impressive way. So yeah, totally agreed there. Well, Doc, we won't keep you any longer, but we really appreciate you coming on and chatting about the Gabriel injury with us. And
Did y'all hear me at all?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, yeah, just thank you.
Is it a sham that's having issues?
Oh, you can't hear me.
I just see a little.
Yeah, no, Doc, can you hear me, Doc?
Yeah.
We're just saying thank you for your time, and we appreciate you coming on here to talk about Gabriel and his injuries and kind of your thoughts on what's happening with the league. So we really appreciate it.
Cool. No, thanks for the time. Sorry for some of the connectivity issues and everything.
Hey, tragedy of technology, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm driving, so I don't know. I'm some of the reception.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
It was interesting. The last point that he mentioned, we actually is something that we've talked about on here before about, one of the kind of impressive things is even through all of this, we've, Mikkel and the staff and the coaches have been able to maintain some kind of stability, which is super impressive.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think, go on, Shem, you first. So.
Okay, so I was just making sure you guys could hear me. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah. And I know we're going to come on to another conversation, and I guess that kind of segues into it, but Doc mentioned something about maybe some squad rotation will help, using more than 13 or 14 players. And it had me thinking earlier that one of the issues, the nature of professional football in Europe and the rest of the world, apart from North America, is that every match has, when you're pushing for, whether it's Champions League or for league titles or whatever, every single match matters. Like managers are almost forced to go with their best possible 11, 90 to 95% of the time. But if you compare that to MLS, because there's playoffs, and all you have to do is finish in the top 9 in the Eastern or Western Conference, you can still go on and win major honors by only having a subpar season, right? So, and just watching MLS this season, Messi's already been on the bench to start a league match, and there are only 6 league matches into the new season, and Messi's already not started before. And that just kind of shows that managers have more leeway when there's less jeopardy involved week in and week out. And I think it's frustrating because the issues with squad building will always persist, because we'd love to have essentially 2 11s that we could trust back to front, right? But no club in the world has that, because unfortunately players have needs. Players want to play, right? And when it comes to, in the case of Gabriel, he's now starting for Brazil. He's recognized as one of the best center backs in the Premier League, arguably in Europe this season. And we have our own personal goals as a club, right? So, and center backs are rotated the least of any other position apart from goalkeepers. So starting your best center back pairing is that's like standard football things, right? So that, of course, it's difficult to have really good quality depth at center back. And of course, we have QER, and we don't want to discuss that. We have other players that could play center back to give Gabriel a rest if we needed to, but they've also dealt with injuries. So it's kind of just like this has been like a huge victim of circumstance problem. But I do think it's interesting that because of the jeopardy involved with professional football that you don't see across other sports, teams can rotate. Like, for example, in the NBA and NHL, they have 82 game seasons before playoffs. You can rest some of your best players. You can reduce their minutes to worry about game load. In baseball, they play 162 games. Pitchers only pitch every fifth game. You'll have your backup shortstop will start 35 times or 40 times because you can do that because playoffs, right? So I think it's sort of like a slippery slope when dealing with match slope with professional footballers across the world because you don't get that luxury. So to have the footballing landscape change in terms of squad building, we'll have to ask clubs to break away from what is maybe A, tradition in terms of how you use players, but also B, players might have to almost kind of reduce their own requirements so they can also A, stay fit and healthy across the season, but also B, some might just have to play less in terms of what they want, just so everyone can kind of find some sort of happy medium. So it's such a difficult question.
The problem in Europe is that it's escalating. It's getting more and more congested. They're adding more. Now they're talking about different formats of a team that like the Champions League, for example. And now you have even more situations rather than less where you have congested fixtures and time for players to get injured. So it's really kind of a bleak situation that we have going on. And I don't think there's really I know we talked about solutions with the doctor, but I feel like it's only expansion outwards of the squad that's really and just luck, just getting lucky with particular players and squad building. So
And that's the thing, right? Like you have the 38 game season, maybe 40 game, maybe like 36, depending on the league. And then you've got the cups, and then you've got, the European competitions now that, Champions League is tacked on 2 more games in the group stage. And then if you don't finish in, I think it's like is it the top 8 or the top 8? If you don't finish in the top 8, then you have to play 2 more games on top of that. And then there's, they're making friendlies now into the Nations League, so players feel compelled to play in that. And then you have the World Cup, and we're probably gonna have another Winter World Cup the next few years, right? And then on top of that, there's the Club World Cup in the summer that teams are gonna go and play in. It's just we're talking about like 60, 70, 80 games a season
without an off season. The thing about the North American sports is they have bigger calendars, but they still work in an off season because you need that as a professional athlete, like Doc was saying. So it's too much at this point, really.
Yeah, it was concerning to me, or it started being concerning to me when like football in general was just okay with things eating into preseason.
Right.
When they started being okay with like, just players aren't going to be back until like 5 days before the season starts. That's when I started getting worried. But in terms of this rotation thing, I really think this is kind of like what's the word I'm looking for here? It's really stuck in my craw because like, I don't know. I sound like I'm.
No, I love that. That's good.
These kids.
It's like Foghorn Leghorn. I say.
I'll say. You know what's really stuck in my craw?
Half our audience don't even know who Foghorn Leghorn was, so they're gonna
just imagine a giant chicken. That sounds like what's his face?
Southern
Benoit
Blanc.
But like, because I saw people responding to the Gabriel thing with like, oh well, maybe we should have just rotated more. And first of all, like we've already talked about Gabriel's situation personally, where he hasn't really played that much in the last 2 weeks. But on top of that, I think the rotation argument is so not bad faith necessarily, but so forgetful of how seasons actually work.
It's the rotation argument is kind of like the sign a world-class player argument of the transfer market. It's like, okay.
Well, why doesn't Rafinha want to play backup to Saka? Like, it's just like people are just like rotate. No, not against that team. They're too good. No, not against that team either. No, they're not good. Well, okay, why don't you go ahead and rotate in the cups? Rotate. Oh my God, why do we always throw the cups? Okay, play against Ipswich. Rotate against Ipswich. Oh, well, why are we losing? Why are our backups not as good as the starters? Okay, you just play the starters. Take the season seriously, please. But rotate. And it's like, you have to pick one. Like, your best players are supposed to play like 95% of the time. And like that's just how it works. And there is a drop in quality, and especially in the Premier League, and I would argue a couple other leagues as well. Like the teams are just too good now, right? You can't play like 3 or 4 backups against like Aston Villa or Brighton or Brentford. Like they will punish you for that, right? Like and even most seasons you can't do it against the newly promoted sides either, because they're actually good enough to deal with it.
Literally, unless you're playing in the Eredivisie and you're PSV, Ajax, or Feyenoord, and you can play half your rotated squad and still beat I don't know, go at an equal 7-0. Yeah. We don't have that luxury in the Premier League. You don't have the luxury in La Liga, Bundesliga, wherever. So. Like
it must be nice to be PSG, because in Liga, like you get to just bring on Gonzalo Ramos and Warren Zaire-Emery and Desiree Doué off the bench, and maybe they can play 15-20 games as starters on top of that,
and still lose the Champions League every season.
They might do it this year, although
it's every year.
I will say the bright side of us like probably losing to Real Madrid in the next round is. I think it would be a Real Madrid PSG matchup, right?
Yeah,
if PSG beat Villa, I mean that'd be really fun.
Surely.
That'd be pretty fun. If Villa were to beat PSG and we lost to Madrid, I don't think I could live with myself. But yeah, it's it's just I think people just kind of forget how seasons work when they talk about this injury situation. So. But I mean, real quick before we kind of get on to this, to the Gyökeres news and conversation, I guess what are you looking to do for the rest of the season with Gabriel out, and maybe particularly against Real Madrid?
It's a hard. I mean, I think the answer would be easy if we didn't have other residual players out injured, right? So I think in an ideal world, you'd probably start, Lewis Skelly at left back, and you would maybe keep Timber at right back, and then go like Calafiori Saliba, or go White Saliba. Start Timber right back, or you start Timber center back with White right back. But again, residual fitness concerns. So unfortunately, it's going to be a Kivior party at the back. And it just kind of, I mean, it just kind of is what it is, right? But not for nothing. I think we said it before, even under the best of circumstances, even before the injury even happened, where we said if we got knocked up by Real Madrid in the Champions League quarterfinals, how upset could we really be, right? So after this injury, we still really can't be all that upset about it. I think
it's like that scene from The Matrix, though, and it's like not like this, not like
definitely not like
this. If we went out full strength and we really gave it everything, but like it's like that. Oh man, what if? I didn't want a what if. I wanted to know that we can go in there full strength and lose to them. Fine, it's Real Madrid. What are you going to do? That's like that's their thing. Is this Champions League? Well, among other things, like probably crime. But at the end of the day, I wanted to. If we lost to them, I wanted it to be with at least Saliba and Gabriel, not Keyboard.
Yeah. By the way, Drew, I want to apologize, because 2 years ago you and I had a debate about Holding or Kivior at the right center back position, and I maintained that Kivior probably would have been a better option, but I was saying that we would have won the league if Kivior had played right. So I would like to formally retract that assertion, because I don't know anymore.
I mean, fair enough.
You're out here winning arguments you didn't even remember.
When she had messaged it earlier today, I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then it took me a good hour to remember. And I was like, "Oh right." Literally 24 months ago, we had this discussion. So.
About once every 3 weeks, I remember that we trotted out Rob Holding in the run-in for the 22-23 season, and I just need to go for a walk just to cool down,
just clear your head.
But yeah, it's tough, right? Because I don't think Kivior is a bad player, but it's terrifying, the prospect of him going up against that front line for Real Madrid. But unfortunately, right, I mean, it sounds like Timber is going to be okay, because it sounds like that was just like a knock impact injury. So sounds like he'll be fine. But White, currently has like that little issue with his knee that he picked up in training. So like even if he was fit tomorrow, like
That's
do
not
you,
a game you play.
exactly, like, do you want to trot out like a just back from injury Ben White against Real Madrid?
Over Kivior, there's maybe a debate there.
Maybe. I mean, if Calafiori is available against Madrid, I think I would do that for sure.
It didn't look too good though. It didn't look too good.
Yeah, I mean, like it. I think Calafiori will at least be available for the away leg, but I think the home leg might come a little too soon for him. But I mean, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think we're looking at a back line of Timber, Saliba, Kivior, and Lewis Skelly, and like it's not terrible. Like I'd be fine with that in most Premier League games, but like it's like John, like you said, it's just a shame that we don't get to play these guys like at our best. And
Also, are we going to sign another left-sided defender now?
I've heard tell about Joel Hato. Yeah.
It's cursed. That left side's cursed.
Yeah, it's I was talking to someone today and they said that our backups for Saliba and Gabriel weren't good enough. And I was like, well, on paper, it's White, Timber, Calafiori, Tomiyasu, and then Kivior, right? So like it's actually pretty good. It's just that all of them are injured right now. And I mean that's the thing that keeps getting us is the cluster injuries. So yeah, I mean I'm gonna be watching the Madrid game from behind my couch. I feel like it's just gonna be tough. So we'll see. But let's chat about Gyökeres real quick because I really do want to have that conversation before we get out of here. So what was it, like a few days ago, like 3 or 4 days ago? Wow, a lot of things have happened since then. But David Ornstein linked us to, well, he basically came out with a report that said we are strongly considering Gyökeres as an alternative to Isak, should that not be possible, which probably won't be possible given the way Newcastle are playing and their likelihood of making the top 5. So yeah, I mean, Gyökeres, 27 years old, also Swedish, plays right now for Sporting, putting up some insane goal numbers, or goals and assist numbers over the last couple of years. I mean, Drew, you wrote about this, so I'll come to you first. What do you make of Gyökeres the player, and do you think? Actually, I'll ask it. I'll ask it like this: after Isak, where would you rank him as a potential option for us, and like give us an idea of like the players he's like before and after?
I feel like it depends on the residual question. The residual question, and I got into a good conversation with one of my friends about this, is if I don't think Isak's happening for the record. I genuinely feel like Newcastle will find a way to keep him, even if they don't get Champions League, to get Europa League, it'll be enough. He's not pushing for a move. He likes the area. He's bedded in well. He just got the club their first trophy and way before we were born.
I think like 70 years or something.
Yeah, it's been 70 years. So he pretty much has it made. I think it will take a monumental bid, and I don't think that level of a bid would make sense for us given the other business we have to do. So that's how I kind of preface it. Whereas if we had one piece of business this summer, I would say break the bank for him. The problem is we don't.
Yeah.
Even if we make sales and we sell well with Berta coming in, the reality is we need a center forward, a left wing, a midfielder, maybe 2. We're going after a goalkeeper we know of. We might be going after a defender. So there's a lot of things we have to, and we've done work with Mendy already. We still have interest in Williams. All these things kind of compound itself into saying that the money just isn't there for it. So I think it would take something untold to happen for us to even have a chance. So with that in mind, the question for me is, it's telling that just after Berta comes in, that this news breaks, which makes me feel like, I think it's a fair thing to suggest that he's come in and maybe he's trumpeting that we need a more win now striker than another player who still has some seasoning. And let's be clear, I rate Benjamin Sesko quite highly, and he's who I would have wanted before this conversation if we weren't going to get Isak. And I wrote about that as well, but more so than Ekitike, and that's a whole other conversation for another time. But I think for me, Gyökeres gives you. It's so hard because Scott Willis did a really good post about Elo, about where his numbers would be translated from Sporting to the Premier League if those same numbers.
Yeah.
And I think that post was great, but unfortunately, you can only do but so much to know how he would get on in our system. You can't really account for that or what the club might do and how we might taper ourselves tactically to get the best out of him. We do know how we create chances. We do know the types of goals we look to get. And my argument is if you've replaced Havertz this season or last season with Gyökeres in those same exact chance scenarios, he's getting 20 goals in the Premier League, which is kind of all any fan would have been wanting for the last however many seasons, since Aubameyang, really. So that, for me, tells me that if we plug Gyökeres into the system, we have a greater chance of winning something. And I like Havertz quite a bit, and we know he's versatile, right? So that opens up the discussion of, do you play him and Ødegaard as dual 10s with Rice behind them, depending who the opponent is, and you get a lot of different tactical solutions, right? So, but for me, if we're looking for a win-now striker, I think Gyökeres makes the most sense. If we're looking for a player who we can season and mold better into what we really want for a striker long-term, then Sesko makes more sense. So I think it's not so much of what I want; it's more of what makes more sense depending on how the club views a project. If the goal is to win the league next season, you have to go for Gyökeres, right? And yeah, the yellow post is great, but the dude gets goals, and he's done it consistently for Sporting now. He does it for Sweden as well. He looked very good in the Championship, which is a really hard league to play in when he's at Coventry as well. So I feel like he would make the most sense for a win-now player. And the fans were fine with getting Ollie Watkins, who's almost 30, getting Gyökeres, who only turns 27 this summer, who's entering his prime, and he'd be available for, what, 60 million or whatever it was. I don't see why you would talk yourself out of that. But if we want a more longer-term player who we can mold along with a younger core, which we do have, then Sesko makes more sense. So it's not so much what I want. Again, it's more of I want the club to go after the player that matches what their actual plan is. So if we're going to try to win next season, go get Gyökeres. If we're more of we hope to win next season, but we're really looking at 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, looking to win multiple Premier League titles long term as well, with a player who then we can develop alongside the younger core of Waneri, Saka, and then the like. Then you go and get Sesko. That would be the way I would break it down.
Yeah. John, how do you see it?
It's crazy. Me and Drew agree on something.
Never happened before, ever. First time for everything.
First time ever that we agree. No, I absolutely listen. I don't think we have the time to work on projects right now. I really, technically we do if that's what the ownership allows for, but the pressure is building season after season on Arteta and this project. And there's an impetus to get something out of next season, maybe even not even just anything, specific honors like like the league, the Champions League. We're getting to those points now where those kind of honors need to start coming in, and it's not just because the fans are going to get on his back. Now we're going to be talking about maybe players' agents who are looking at this project going, everything you said, it's all great. We love everything here. We love the family here, but he really needs to get some silverware. He's not getting any younger. My client only has a couple, whatever moves, whatever these agents tell their players. It's going to be a pressure from not only externally from fans, but maybe internally from the players themselves. So I agree with Drew again that I think it's a project determinative kind of a signing, and you're looking at apples and oranges between the two of them potentially. But I really don't think it would be prudent for the club to make a decision on the future right now. And it's kind of almost weird to say that because, like you said, Gyökeres is turning 27 This is not someone that we're not going to have for a long period of time.
Right, you get
knock
three.
on wood.
You get his entire prime. You get 3-4 years out of him before he's
3, 4, maybe 5 nowadays. I mean, and then that's a lot of time to mold a player. You know, to not only keep what he's good at, but also say this is how we want to play as well, which will also kind of take the burden off the club to find someone that's coming through, to let younger players kind of to come through as well. So I think, like most of the time, I agree with Drew. I would go with Gyökeres in this situation, given what we need to get out of next season. And that's how I feel.
Yeah, I think Gyökeres is probably sitting like at the top of my, if not Isak, then who list.
Yes,
I'm surprised. I didn't expect that. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know why, but for some reason I thought you were gonna go for a younger option. I have no basis. I guess previous conversation.
I guess we're just very persuasive, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, right? I mean, like what you guys are saying is absolutely right. Where we're hitting a point in the project where you got to win something, right? And like I don't like saying that. I really do feel like almost like spoiled when I say that, but like you are hitting the point in the project where like something, like you guys have to lift some silverware, or otherwise guys like Saliba, guys like Saka, maybe even guys like Rice are going to start asking questions. Like you guys said, are going to start asking questions of what they're doing here. And so like, Šeško seems great, but Šeško, you're looking at 18 to 24 months in terms of like really molding that guy. Gyökeres, yes, there is a possibility that he walks in and he's not up to scratch. But I mean, we were talking about a guy who played in England for Coventry, which is a championship is a pretty competitive league on its own. He played there for a couple seasons, and he's playing the Champions League, and he's been up against really big teams like Benfica and Porto and done quite well, right? So this isn't a scrub, and I've been watching a bit of him recently. Really like robust physically in terms of his build, very fast, loves to dribble at defenders, get shots off. Actually surprisingly good in link-up play, which I didn't expect from him. Back to goal, I don't love it, but like that's okay. Aerially, I don't think he's great either. But I think that's something that if any team can make up for it, the Arsenal can, right? Like you just play Havertz at left 8 as kind of a second striker of sorts, and I think you can more than make up for that. So yeah, I mean, the number one thing I'm thinking of is there are so many moments over the last couple seasons where the ball has kind of fallen to Odegaard or fallen to Trossard or fallen to Martinelli or Havertz in the penalty area, and they've taken that extra touch or they've missed a really straightforward chance. And I look at Gyökeres and I think that's going in the back of the net.
It's going in the net.
It's Correct. Going in the net. And at the end of the day, I think that matters to me more than anything else. Like even if he comes in and he's Aubameyang, just a low, like 14 touch per game kind of guy, right? I'll take it. And he isn't. Like he's 40 plus touches every game. That guy gets involved in the buildup. But just I think of some of the chances that fall to our other attacking players, and I see what Gyökeres can do with the half chance. He doesn't mess around. He puts his foot through it.
He's very we always say clinical. We want a clinical striker. How many times are we saying we want a clinical striker? And that's what he is. So if you're one of the people who have at any point in Arteta's reign said we need a clinical striker, that's what you're getting with him. Yeah. By almost in a capital C, the definition of a clinical striker.
Yeah. And if there's anyone who can coach up kind of the more lacking areas of Gyökeres' game, like maybe his physicality with defenders, maybe kind of some of his movement in the box, in certain situations, like against low blocks and all that, I think Mikel Arteta is the guy who can do that, right? So,
but I also think going after someone like him, the one thing I want fans to also realize is when you link the names that we're going after, they're players that would allow us to be far more incisive, faster in transition. Zubimendi is very good at getting the ball into the midfield with one touch. You know, we're constantly linked with Nico Williams, who's a really direct player, loves to run at players, pull people out of shape, right? Drive at things. We know Saka can do that when he has to. We know Erdegaard, how when he's on song, how well he drives play as well. Not when he has to.
Marino too. One
Right.
of the things that I think people don't give Marino credit for is his kind of like a pass economy that he has.
Yeah, no, I think it's like that's spot on. I think if you plug all those things into a system, and this is obviously just a theory, but if you plug all those names in and you drop Gyok into that, another player who's very direct, and fans have to think back to when we played Sporting, and we didn't give them any sniffs, but he would go 1v2, v3 against the defense, and he would outpace Gabriel and Saliba and go physical with them and still get a shot away. That's kind of what we're missing right now in the striker.
There's that one moment late in the match where he gets the ball kind of like just past midfield,
Yep.
and then he spins past Saliba,
Yep.
and then he dribbles all the way into our penalty box, competing with Gabriel, holding him off, fires a shot on his weak foot, and forces Raya to tip the ball onto the post.
Right, and as much as I love Havertz, he's not doing that.
No.
As much as I love anybody else who we could maybe play at center forward this season, none of them have that capability. And he's doing it isolated against arguably the best center back pairing in England and one of the best center back pairings in Europe this season, if not also last season. So I think if you, like John said, I think John summed it up perfectly. If you've ever had the argument that I just want a guy to go out and get goals, there's no debate to be had here. And aesthetics aside, and I see a lot of debate on socials about fans are now drumming up Ekitike, and that it drives me insane because fans would rather go out and get a young player who has one season on the books of decent goal scoring return for a club that loves to profile goal scorers to flip them for a massive profit, and none of those players have gone on to actually better themselves since they left Eintracht Frankfurt. Why would you want that just because he reminds you of Thierry Henry maybe at a push when you could go in and get Gyökeres and plop him down? And I think I try to find like a North American sports reference sometimes for the American listeners, but it's the same thing. Like, I don't know, John, it's like the Blackhawks went out at trade deadline and they're pushing for a cup, and they go out and they want to get a goal scorer because you're lacking something. It's similar to that. You go out and you get a thing that pushes you over the line to make a cup run, or whatever it is. I liken this to that, or something in that same realm. So I just don't. And if it's affordable, the wages hopefully wouldn't be massive. There's no reason to not do it.
And that's the other thing, right? When we're talking about affordability, you could get Isak, right? And I would be thrilled. Make no mistake about it. But for the price of what Isak might cost, and that's going to be, we don't know what that number is, right? Because we don't know if Newcastle's made the Champions League yet. On top of that, it sounds like they still owe Real Sociedad money for the Isak transfer, so there's that as well. And then Sociedad have a pretty substantial sell-on clause on top of that, which just increases the transfer price. So
Great point.
So for the price you could get Isak for, you could get Gyökeres and then like a Xavi Simons, right? You could get Gyökeres and maybe like a Nuno Mendes or something, right? So you can do a little bit more. Like I'm thinking in my head right now, like of a summer that consists of Juan Garcia, Martin Zubimendi, Xavi Simons, Nico Williams, Victor Gyökeres.
That would be an insane.
That's an insane summer, and like you can afford that.
Good.
We can afford that if we don't sign Isak, and I don't think Xavi is going to happen, even though I would love it. But
you replace him with Naipen, and then you still have that same discussion.
Yeah.
You're still getting 4 or 5 players in because you're being sensible with your spending, but you're also targeting improvements across the team while also raising the floor and raising the ceiling, which we've talked about before.
Yeah. And so, I think Gyökeres, kind of just to put it simply, is a player with a very fair price tag on him, and that allows you to do more in a summer transfer window where, frankly, we do have a lot to do. So I think for me it goes kind of Isak and then Gyökeres, and then probably Šeško, and then Watkins, and then Ekitike. I think I would probably throw Osimhen kind of after Sheshko on that
I'm gonna
list.
hang up. I'm gonna hang up.
Whoa, yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, one name I would want to. Well, there's two names. One name popped up recently. I saw at work, but another one I think people sleep on is Retegui from Atalanta. He's actually he just goes out and he gets goals.
Yeah.
Like he's not a flashy player by any means. I don't know if he necessarily fits everything we need, but if you put him into the box and get him on a chance, he might score it. And another name was Lucha at Udinese, and a lot of fans won't know who he is because unless you watch Udinese or Serie A, you have no clue. But he's 6'7" and a good box striker. I don't know, but I don't think those will happen. But I do think that there's probably a hierarchical list that Berta has, and I think the one for the first time in a while, just off the back of the Gyok news, I've gotten some confidence that we'll actually get big deals done, which I didn't always have before because our track record showed we couldn't get those deals done. Yeah. So as long as Berta's come in to say, he's put in his 2 cents, that's clear. As long as we can go out and get the deals done now, I'll still always have faith in what the club are trying to do in terms of the players they're targeting, as long as it makes sense for what we're actually going after, which is what we talked about before. So.
Yeah. The Gyökeres news from Ornstein really did tell me one thing, which was, well, I guess 2 things, right? One, we're looking at Gyökeres, and 2, that we're doing that because Berta came in, found out that we really wanted Isak, and said, that's going to cost a lot of money, right? And I think I really do find that encouraging. Just kind of pivot to Berta real quick. I do find that really encouraging that he's already come in and made his thoughts known, right? And is trying to push our transfer business in a particular direction, or at least kind of come up with alternatives for Arteta and the board to consider, which is, again, really encouraging. And, it is important to take a lot of the reports that we're going to see in the future with a grain of salt, because Berta's known for trying to use the media as part of his negotiations, as kind of part of his strategy in the window. But it's just nice to see us looking proactive in the market again, which I don't think we've always been.
Agreed. So we have this one policy at work, is that we really don't listen to transfer rumors when we're covering things. If it's not from Ornstein, don't. And I try to say to fans all the time, especially because the club, even before I even started working at my current job, the club went through great lengths to kind of get rid of all those insiders trying to dispense information and putting our cards on the table beforehand. The club don't want us to know, don't want other clubs to know what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Because that's how transfer prices get driven up out of maybe the price point we want to pay. So I think, for fans listening, if it doesn't come from Ornstein, don't even listen to Fabrizio Romano, because we won't get into that at the moment. If it doesn't come from Ornstein, just don't listen. Just be patient. And there's going to be so many rumors surrounding this summer as well. It's just like wait for hard facts. But I do think that, and I kind of said it, like, we're in for a big summer. And I think
you heard it here first. Dissociate. until Ornstein speaks. Dissociate. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Go full Severance.
Yeah.
I don't know. I am pretty excited about the Gyökeres link, because it just shows us kind of thinking, really thinking about what we're doing in the market, kind of in a way that I didn't sense during the Edu era. And that's not to knock Edu or anything, but again, it just kind of goes back to proactivity in the market. So, well, is anyone else got anything before we get out of here? Or
no, I'm about ready to look at a pillow real fast. I'm so tired.
Yeah,
we had this conversation before. I'm exhausted. So
yeah, you've been up for a while.
Yeah.
John, anything?
No, it was a good chat. Always.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Tell me, before we get out of here, tell me your favorite thing about Tottenham right now.
That's terrible.
There's no other appropriate response.
No, you know what? I'll tell you what my favorite thing about them is. It's almost like it's like they're like cosmically bad, It's like almost like it's almost like statistical. Like someone needs to study that if they aren't already, because it's actually fascinating just how shit they are.
They have like Chicago like Cubs style luck, like Red Sox type stuff. Like it's an actual jinx. And in all seriousness,
the Chicago Cubs just won the World Series in
before they won the World Series, that long streak that happened.
To the point where it's almost like there was like the questions of it being cursed, and like you start going, maybe it's not a joke. Maybe it's not tongue in cheek anymore. Maybe they're legit cursed. I think there's something hilarious. They're like statistically significantly awful.
Yeah. I just think it's wonderful where, last season they willingly sacrificed a Champions League spot and let City win that match. And I am 100% sure that Romero and Son in particular really purposefully let certain moments in that match pass them by because they thought it would endear them to the fans. And they were right. But, it's really lovely after watching Spurs celebrate losing to City and losing that Champions League place just to spite us in the title race, seeing them just kind of fall apart. Ange and the Spurs fan base hate each other so much. You had Ange cupping his ear at Spurs fans after Sarr scored that goal, only for it to be ruled as a foul and build up. The Spursiest thing. It's the Spursiest thing. And they're sitting in 14th right now after 30 games. They're level on points with Everton and West Ham, two teams who have been, pretty thoroughly mediocre this season. And they're going to fire Ange in the summer. They're going to have trouble bringing in a new manager because who's going to want to coach them? And their remaining elite player, Heung-min Son, now looks like he's very well past his prime. So that era is over. It's just they are entering an era of uncertainty, and I couldn't love it more for them. And so, happy St. Totteringham's Day, and I think we're going to have several more in the coming years to celebrate. So that's my favorite thing about Spurs. But we'll call it there. And we'll go ahead and get out of here. Let Drew get some sleep. Thank you so much for being here with us. Again, I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale and on Blue Sky at shamsdale.bsky.social. Drew, you can follow him at GeeChyKid on Twitter and at supplyingdemandrew.bsky.social on Blue Sky. John, you can follow on Twitter at 305cast and at yellowribbons.bsky.social on Blue Sky. You can follow the pod at NotThatGooner on Twitter, notthatgooner.bsky.social on Blue Sky. You can check us out on YouTube at Not That Kind of Gooner and on Instagram at Not That Kind of Gooner. Please do leave us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It would be, really helpful and kind of getting the pod out there and letting more and more people see it. But thank you so much for being here with us. And we will be back with you after the Everton match. And we will basically just be mentally preparing for the Real Madrid match. So until then, take care. We'll talk to you soon. And bye. Bye.
Secret Gooner. All right, I'm a Gooner. Oh, I love you!
Santi Cazorla! Saka! That is a goal! When Eric